Um, so now we're recording, and the I guess we should go over the action items from last time. Did anyone perform any of the action items that we should talk about? The first one was if we investigated more about placement new and what its status was. Um, I believe. Oh, that was a Klizma, and they said that they would not be here today.
Yeah, he
Um,
gave a short update though, mentioning that for him is not a priority. It was more so it's a nice to have, but it's not a must fix.
it's a nice to have. Okay, well, then that sounds fine. Um, and we were going to also, they left some thoughts that they could. There's a whole separate issue for it now, so we can gather information there about, you know, checking with maybe uninit and so forth. Um, the next one was Rust audio libraries. Does anyone want to give any updates on Sapal had some latency issues, I believe. Um, I asked around. I guess they have like an open issue about how that is. It's a known problem, and they feel that it's something they can solve. They just need hands to actually do that work. They're a little short-staffed at the moment, so to speak. Um, I think Ishitatsuki is the name of uh, yeah, Ishitatsuki is they're on Discord in the Amethyst group or the official group. They are, I guess, the current maintainer of Sapal, and they asked for more help if anyone has any help in that area. But they feel like the latency can be handled. As far as the Sapal Rodeo workload split, um, that you'd probably have to discuss that more with them. Um, Rust on mobile. Did anyone do anything with Rust on mobile?
Nope.
Okay. Um,
Like we have people who run on iOS. Um, I can ask them to provide their scripts and workflows on how they test it. Maybe that would be helpful.
yeah. Um, I have heard that you like you need a Mac to perform some of the steps of building an iOS app, but I don't know if that's true because some people say that they do it in CI and maybe the CI is able to actually set that up somehow, so I would like to know. Uh, the custom allocators. Did anyone talk about custom allocators with anyone?
In regard to the previous topic, I think like the guys, I'm not sure what the game studio's name was that were here about the mobile games. They mentioned that they had the info, and they were willing to write like a blog post or something explaining how they'd set up for iOS.
Oh,
But
yes.
Yes, that's me.
Oh,
ah, okay.
I've got there's a Rust on mobile GitHub repo that I have, but specifically, I think we were talking about Android
Yeah.
was something that we didn't have any information on, and I have not done anything there yet. So.
um, there's a person on the community server named Mauling Monkey who seems to know quite a bit about running Rust on Android. Their latest project has been this crazy Android API bindings suite that they've been working on that like it goes over the entire Android API and generates like 2 million lines of code or something crazy. So I'm sure that they must have some testing set up that we can get.
What was that name?
Mauling Monkey?
Balling
Um,
Monkey. Okay.
yeah, they have like a chimpanzee wearing a suit holding a handgun for an icon. um, I will try to remember to cajole them into giving us the info on how that setup works. Um,
Sorry, Tyler, could you paste the repo in the Hangouts of the Rust on Mobile?
Sure. Yeah.
Cheers.
That work?
Yep.
yes.
Cool.
I'm going to copy this into the issue as well, so that we have that for later. Let's see. Um, so now we could do custom allocator follow-up if we need to, if we have anything to talk about with allocators. I think the long-term goal is that box gets a phantom, gets, in addition to being box T, it's like box TA. Um, and then it can specify what allocator it's part of, which, if that specification is a zero size type, would end up being zero overhead, and it would just know somehow like where to throw its memory back to. If you have like a global current frame allocator in addition to the global general allocator, then that seems probably reasonable. If people need to do custom allocators like immediately today, they can create box-like types that do the same thing without having a type parameter stuck on them. I don't know if anyone needs custom allocators right away and is willing to do that. You'd have to basically split all your boxing types to use the sub allocator for whatever separate allocator, not the global one. I'm not a person that needs custom allocators that much, so that I don't have opinions in this area. Okay. Um, Wodan, ecosystem guide. Do you have any updates?
Yeah, so I brought it up last time because I created a proposal on the particular issue, but I've not really had any feedback, so that's why I brought it up in the meeting. But it was towards the very end when it was already being wrapped up, in the sense like, how are we going to progress? Because if I don't really have any input, then I don't know whether the proposal that I made is any good. Um, so that's where we're at, sort of still.
I think that the difficulty is our charter saying that we're not supposed to be favoring stuff too much, um,
Hmm.
which means we can try to give. I mean, there's some amount of objective information that I'm sure we can give people, like, this is this is a crate that does this thing. Here are the docs. Here's the repo, and so forth. And that's kind of what crates.io already does. We can try to uh, organize it a little better, but then that's basically, are we game yet? Um,
Yeah.
I think I think what might work is if individual people who are not speaking for the working group choose to make ecosystem guides, then they can say, look, this is my guide to what sort of crates you should and shouldn't use, and then people can look through that sort of collection of guides. In terms of something being authoritative, I don't think that we're sort of fit to develop that. But I know that a lot of people, like when Icefox posted in the Rust Game Dev Reddit about like the state of Rust graphics programming in the start of 2019, and they went over like, okay, this is the GL crate, the Glium crate, the GFX HAL, the WGPU, and so forth, and like how practical is it to get through those sorts of things. A lot of people really liked that. Um, and the opinions that Icefox wrote down were a little bit heated, and some of the like crate owners, like when he did one about like what game engines and game frameworks, and he had some harsh things to say about Piston, and the Piston dev was like, I don't think this is fair, and Icefox said, well, then improve it and I will update my assessment. Which is like, I don't know, how do people feel about that?
So I think like the proposal itself tried to stay as unbiased as possible in terms of coming up with objective measures that we could put on uh, categorizing different work and laying it out in such a structure that people who are working on high level things would be able to pick out the high level components and put those together, and the same for mid level and low level. And then per potential category, we'd also say, for example, okay, we have a graphics low level library. This only supports OpenGL, or this supports OpenGL and DirectX or Vulkan or Metal and so on. And just to give a quick overview of what's there and what might potentially be missing, and doing this for different categories, to give a little bit more insight on an objective level as to the quality, or not even the quality, but as to the features that are provided by different components, and then also make a deduction of what is still missing in the ecosystem, and try and figure out why that's missing. I think that was like the original intent of my proposal. Uh, More so said that as a working group, we have a better understanding of what is there in the ecosystem and what's not there, and based on that, come up with action items for what we need to solve.
Okay, and I recall that there was the, either you or someone else had an API map that was like a big old 2D grid of sort of what level of abstraction of things, and then like horizontally that there was a whole bunch of categories,
Yeah, correct.
and that we were trying to fill in the map and stuff.
Hmm.
Was that going to be in the ecosystem guide? Because I think that that sounds like something people would want. Like, I think that really sounds useful that we should try and make sure that it gets put somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. So that was one of the parts of my proposal, to make something that mimics those levels and those components, and split up whatever crates already exist and try and match them within that like overall ecosystem overview, um, and then see which parts are missing. So that was one of the things in my proposal. But as I said, there hadn't been much feedback, so I wasn't sure like what was desirable within the working group.
Well, I desire that sort of thing.
It sounds useful, but I'm not sure if the table is going to represent the structure properly, since it's technically a graph. Um, say, I'm thinking of a concrete example. If you're trying to draw a table that would have GFX, HAL, Randy, and WGPU, would you put WGPU on like a higher row than Randy or not? The problem is that like it uses just two of Randy's components. It doesn't use the whole lot of Randy, and Randy has some quite high level stuff as well. So it's hard to pinpoint it to a concrete level of abstraction, maybe.
That's fair enough. Um,
But
I
yeah,
think, like
maybe
anything, when you classify, it's difficult to put something within a particular box. That's right. I'm not sure. Like, I think the trade-off would be like, does this give us a better understanding of the total ecosystem, and then whether that's worth it.
I think I think we should start with your proposal and discuss the draft table. It is seemingly objective. It fits under the scope of work, and it is useful. Would you be able to draft it?
So the proposal is actually already in the issue for the ecosystem. I was just looking up because I think it's on the website uh, part. But the proposal that I made is already there. The categorization into different components and what the specs would be for those different components, that's not there yet, if that's what you're referring to.
Sorry, you said issue 40?
No, 6. I'll just paste it in the Hangouts.
Okay. Well, yeah. Um, this is good. Uh, I agree that if you take this outline and then sort of make a draft, maybe don't even cover every single crate. Just cover like two or three example crates as to how it might look to sort of
Hmm.
put them into this template. Then we could start with that, and we can go from there.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because I think that we concluded that, let me see, Doppio slash, she's the maintainer of Are We Game Yet, I think. Um, and we just have to make pull request and hope that they accept it.
That is about what they described as
Yeah,
their desired workflow.
because that was another concern. Like, if there's a lot of work that actually ends up going into this and then they don't accept it, then would we as a working group actually host this work?
I'm sure
Can
someone
we,
would host it, even if it wouldn't be officially hosted on the working group's website.
if the structure of this is just a table, can we just put it in one of the files or wiki pages on that project?
Uh, on the Rust Game Dev project,
Yep.
um, we should be able to. Currently, the repo is set that we. Oh, the working group and the website are both set to like have wiki support. We just don't actually have any wiki pages.
It's just, it seems strange to me to have a product of the working group to depend on the website, which we don't have any control of.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. Um, I agree. I wish I had a better answer for you there. Uh,
Like we can move it to the website anytime in the future. It's just we don't have to start like that.
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll come up with a two or three crate sort of draft of what it would start looking like to fill in this template for those crates. May say Winit and GFX How say, because those are
Okay.
both very foundational. And then we can put it in the game dev website as a PR, or onto our wiki. I don't I'm not sure that I like the wiki as much because I don't believe that the wiki allows for the PR process with edits. Um, so it's harder to have discussions about changes that way. Um, but we have the GitHub IO website is that where we have currently we just have that one blog. But I'm sure we could make a section for like just a static page that shows a chart.
Okay. So I guess I'll just champion that then and try and finish it before the next meeting, and then I'll use WGPU, you said, and win it and create an example of how I would imagine it being in the architecture overview with dependencies and so on, and how it would fit within the different levels. Uh,
Yeah, that all sounds good.
and then
Um,
like we'll decide how we proceed from there if that's something that we like or not.
I think Daniel mentioned GFX HAL and Winit, but it doesn't really
Apologies for
matter
that.
Oh,
which ones you pick.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
just don't invest too hard into making it polished because we're probably going to iterate on it a few times.
Yeah. Okay.
And thank you.
I know.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Um, let's see. The next action item we had was the improving issue tracker triage. Uh, I don't believe we did anything here, as far as I know. Like we haven't, almost no movement on the issue tracker has happened since the last meeting, of any sort. Either like adding an extra person as a maintainer, or coming up with a label system, or anything like that. Um, if if people aren't actually interested in doing it, I guess we don't have to do it. That was just a thought from the last meeting. Um, do people want to keep working with this or sort of just drop the idea?
Um, I think like you proposed the issue tracker triage. After I mentioned that, it seems like there is, because I think also the past 2 weeks there wasn't a much happening actually in the working group, and you proposed like it, like everyone is doing other work as well, so everything that happens in the working group is on a voluntary basis, which makes it when people want to contribute something, they have limited time, and then they either want to pick something small or something that they feel would mean something. So having smaller tasks or having a clear idea of what priorities are would go a long way towards potentially getting people to spend their time more efficiently within the working group, but I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. So I think that's how this got raised, at least to give some context.
Yeah, if we had a way, I think the difficulty is that we don't actually do any work in the repo itself, really. And so all of our issues are just telling people to go elsewhere, which can get out of sync easily. I don't know that it has to get out of sync. We can just sort of keep on top of it and it should be fine. Um, Currently, the big issues to develop on are like Winit and Sepal, as far as I know. Uh, Dimitri, is there additional sort of immediate work to be done in WGPU or GFX HAL or anything like that, or is it just sort of the slow normal progress?
The the big chunks of work was recently being completed, so right now there's nothing emergent, nothing urgent.
Okay, and
And
I've
when I say it was completed, I mean the stuff that I described in the update link, which is on the issue you might have seen.
um was that the oh yeah, it was in the if we have extra time. So we can open that up in a second. Um, but earlier on the list was the survey for Rust game development ecosystem. As far as I know, the completed form of the survey wasn't actually like sort of assembled by Erland yet. Does anyone else know if that happened? Okay. Then I guess we won't discuss the ecosystem survey. Which brings us back to you, Dimitri. Uh, I think I read this
Um,
blog post. Could you the featureless WGPU sounds very good, but I'm interested in the new swap chain model. Could you describe that perhaps after your initial sort of overview?
okay. Yeah, so the new swap chain model is super simple and limited. You every frame you just get a new image view. You can only render to it. You render to it, and you move it back to WebGPU. So it's basically a linear type um, that has very limited capabilities. And what it allows us to do is just directly map it to Metal, OpenGL, D3, D11, D3, D12. It requires a little bit of magic on Vulkan side, but nothing to be afraid of. Um, so it's a major derivation from Vulkan. Whenever somebody compares GFX HAL with Vulkan, that's the major thing that we have extra. But at the same time, in Vulkan, the swap chain is an extension. It's not a part of the core anyway. So it is very much like we would introduce our own extension for the swap chain that's different from the KHR extension.
Okay.
And
And
we basically recommend it for all users at this point, unless you have a specific reason to not use the new swap chain model.
uh, it says here that proper full screen and resizing behavior, is that before I was under the impression that you had to like kind of tear down your whole pipeline and build a new one if your window resized, which may be wrong, but is that a lot easier to do now?
you can still have technically a different format of the window if your swap chain is lost or window is resized, like theoretically. But the problem was basically on the implementation level inside GFX, that whenever you resize, um, DirectX, for example, requires you to have all the references to be destroyed to the images of the swap chain, which is very much not like Vulkan works. And doing the proper resize in D3D 11, 12, and Metal was nearly impossible with the old swap chain. So it kind of worked, but it was crappy. It introduced the stalls, like we had to wait for GPU on resize, and it was not the best. Um, right now, what we have is that resize on macOS works flawlessly, and we have iOS application that can be like rotated screen and stuff, and it's all working nicely.
Oh, like when the phone gets oriented and it does the sort of transition animation thing.
Yeah, it doesn't stall when it does that.
Okay. I mean, that sounds great. That's when I wrote the GFX How tutorial that I did, that was one of the biggest questions people repeatedly had is, how do I resize the window? And I told them, well, destroy everything.
Right. So now instead of destroying the swap chain, you just call configure swap chain on your surface, and that's basically it.
Well, good. So, but is this is only for WGPU? This doesn't really affect how GFX HAL works underneath, or is it both?
It is exposed in JFX HAL, and I would recommend it for all users of JFX HAL, including Randy if possible.
Okay.
It's just that for web GPU, it's a very nice fit, and it's part of the design um, requirement to make it work good with web GPU.
Okay. Okay. Um, I guess I could ask because I'm sure people would want sort of an informed opinion about this, but should a normal user, if they're going to pick between WGPU or GFX HAL, should they sort of pick WGPU by default because it has sort of intelligent defaults?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Okay. Um,
The reason I brought up this update to discussion for us is because in terms of the ecosystem, there is a large discussion on Reddit about this update, and a lot of people are confused about like what the hell is going on, why we have multiple crates, what do I use, why is it not for the web, and so forth. So people are confused, and it's a larger problem than just our project. It's an ecosystem problem. I think it will be solved, I hope, by having any kind of a guide which we can just point to whenever people ask. Um, so I'm excited to see the draft uh, that we discussed earlier whenever it appears.
yeah. Oh, and then you had well, not to change the subject too much, but you had the other game engines in Rust link. This is on the Amethyst wiki, and you wanted to move it sort of into. Would you think that this is to be part of the ecosystem guide?
So I just recall this link because I used to maintain and support it and keep all the engines in one place. I think it can fit into our ecosystem guide. Yes, it's just a good material to migrate. It may be a little bit outdated, but um, it has some stuff, some information to migrate.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, Wodan, if you not that you have to include all of these items in your initial draft, but what I would suggest is that you sort of look over it and sort of ensure that your format of the draft will support all the different types of things in here in an intelligent way. Just sort of like make sure you don't paint yourself into a corner, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I've heard of about two-thirds of what's on this list, but some of these, like Snowmew, I've never heard of. So I like the comprehensiveness of this list.
Yeah, that's the things that you haven't heard of probably don't need to be included in the guide today. They are too old or
Oh,
unmaintained.
yeah, they're in the abandoned section. Okay.
Yeah. The takeaways from the table is, aside from it being informational, is just it's very useful to specify the end users as like, here is the binaries, the projects that use the libraries, because you have no idea how to discover them technically. It's not like you can find the binaries in crates.io.
Well, so if a project that has a binary is uploaded to crates.io, then you could see it in the reverse dependencies, I think. But
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of binaries aren't put on crates.io at all.
Is there a reason to put your binary on crates.io?
Um, if your binary is something that works with cargo install, despite how anemic that utility is, then you can put it on crates.io as a way to distribute it uh, easily, like cross-platform. And you can just say, hey, if you want to run my game, just use cargo install foobar. Um, Other than that, I think usually it's not game stuff. It's like ripgrep is available on crates.io, and like cargo plugins, of course, on crates.io and stuff like that. It's usually utility programs.
So when you say like the binaries that use these projects, then do you mean like the binaries of Piston, or for example, a game that's using Piston, the binaries of those?
I mean, the other projects that use the library, but they themselves, since they are leaves in the tree, they are not on crates.io. So hematite, I don't know how you pronounce that.
Hematite is
Uh,
correct.
Hematite is one of the examples. Um, it's a game. It's using Piston, and yet, like, it's not discoverable if you're just looking at Piston on either crates or somewhere else.
Okay. That would be good because in my proposal, I included to see dependencies going up and down within crates, but it would indeed be difficult to do that for leaves. But there would be a potentiality for people to link those two particular crates that we have in our ecosystem guide.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's probably, I think this is a issue that the sort of language maintainers also have, is that as Rust grows, we sort of move away from primarily libraries to having a lot of binaries that aren't on crates.io. And so, like, they added it to Crater, a system where it can also go through GitHub and pull out things that way, because the number of people whose code is potentially breaking a bit when they made changes was going up because it wasn't scraping GitHub as well. So it's definitely a real concern to have the sort of the final end projects be accounted for. Um, well, we have 15 minutes, I suppose. Does anyone want to speak on about an issue?
Yes, I put another issue earlier about the row window handle.
Oh, yes. It's not highlighted. I missed it. Unfortunately, that's an Ospial thing, and they do not appear to be here today.
Okay.
Um, but we could discuss. You had said before about um, something either having raw window handle um, interface with GL context stuff, or perhaps we could make a separate crate, sort of similar in theme of abstracting GL contexts. Do you have any sort of,
Yes,
yeah,
that was not the topic that I wanted to discuss. I don't have any new ideas on that part.
okay. Well,
The
what did you
the
want to
topic,
discuss?
yes, I wanted to to say that raw window handle works well, but because it's not implemented for WinID 0.19 and SDL and GLFW, it's very limited, and that's like a low-hanging fruit to have total domination for raw window handle is those three pieces.
Uh, I may have forgotten about GLFW when I sent around the requests for people to start using raw window handle. I know that I sent an issue to SDL2 and they said that they would allow it as a feature if someone did the PR for them. However, I believe that currently I don't think that they use the syswm header in their bindings generation. So they would, whoever does that PR would have to add in the header, like redo all the bindings in SDL sys, and then like PR that, and then update the SDL2 crate that goes on top of it to account for the extra stuff. It it would be messy, to put it succinctly. um, I don't. GLFW might be fine. They might be more easily. Oh, they're managed by the Piston developers. And yeah, I never sent them an issue. So I can send them an issue to please support the raw window handle API at least. I will open this right now.
Thank you. And a very important piece missing is support for WinID 0.9, 0.19.
We I get that could be added as a patch release, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
In the current version. Yeah. I will try to get them to do that. Um, and we can probably do it. I have a set of alternative bindings and wrappings for SDL2 that I've recently sort of revised work on, so I will definitely make sure that it supports raw window handle as soon as possible. And how many people are still on the WinIT 0.19 as I guess the question. Have people been working with the alpha using the new event loop? Because I think it seems to be a greatly improved experience from what I have tested with the alpha, but I don't know.
It's still the alpha though. Like, how do you expect everyone to migrate to alpha?
The only reason it's alpha is because it's like not fully implemented on some platforms, which I admit is that is a big problem. But on the platforms that do support it, it works like as well as when it works.
I think some issue is it's hard to actually migrate from the 0.19 version, and with regards to actual games, due to how the event loop is working.
Yeah, that's the
looking
biggest
at the
reason.
new TFXRS examples, there were quite a few changes, and I'm not totally up with why they were required, but it looks like, for example, the whole quad example of GFXRS is completely reworked.
Yeah. So the way that the new event loop works is that before people would generally call pull events, and that would pull an event out of the event queue, and then you would handle it, and you would call pull events again until eventually there was no event in the queue. Then you do the rest of your game frame. Now, what happens is that you pass a closure to, there's like an event loop.run method, and you pass a closure that moves basically your entire program state into that closure to that method, and then it will call your closure with events as they arrive, including an event for when the queue is cleared. and you would use that to like simulate your game world or whatever. And then there's a separate event for redraw requested when you would do your drawing. And the reason for all of this sort of jumping through hoop stuff is that um, the browser versions and I think also Mac OS like fundamentally didn't really support the pull events system properly. So it was kind of lying to you the entire time that any of your stuff was cross-platform. And with this new style, it it is a limitation to programs that only choose to run on the desktop, and um, you can use an extension if you want to do just desktop stuff. But if you really want to be cross-platform, like when it claims, then you have to use this new style to work properly within to run inside a browser. You don't run an event loop. The browser runs an event loop and decides when to call your WASM program and stuff. Um, but if you want, there are desktop extension traits that if you import them, then it gives the event loop back that old poll event functionality. So it can work like before, but you are this time you're finally made aware of the fact that if you do this, you're locking yourself to only working properly on the desktop.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Thanks.
um,
I never knew it.
on Windows, the other problem is that on Windows and Mac, you don't get smooth scrolling if you use poll events because um, when the user grabs the edge of the window and starts resizing, that keeps control flow from returning to the main event loop. Control flow stays stuck within like a resizing loop until the user lets go of the size and you get the final sort of size that it settles on. Um, which, I don't know, maybe your game doesn't care about that. Most video games, if it's fine if they don't operate while the game is having its window resized, because that happens pretty briefly. For like a desktop application, like an Office application, you want your entire GUI to be resizing the entire time, and that's a big deal. So they need to be able to support that case. And that's
Oh,
why everyone had a major breaking change thrown down their throats.
just to wrap up the discussion and make sure that I have the minutes correctly. So for the raw window handle, it still requires GLFW, SDL2, and WinIt 0.19 support for it to be really useful. And as to the SDL2 maintainers, they mentioned that they'd accept the PR that incorporates the changes, but no one has done a PR yet. And for GLFW, you'll send a request to them, right, Daniel?
Yes, I will send a request to them, and I speak to Ospial and other Winit people fairly regularly because they're in the community Discord, so I should be able to at least get a little bit of that rolling within the next 2 weeks before the next meeting, I think.
Okay, I'll add that. Cheers.
One open point for raw window handle would be Mac support. I think it's still somewhat in the limbo on how to expose it.
Oh,
Yeah, it's basically how the surface is exposed there. I think there's still some discrepancies regarding to Vulkan, for example.
okay.
This still hasn't been touched at all.
You mean whether or not we expose the CA metal layer as opposed to a surface on metal?
Yeah.
Is there already an open issue in the raw window handle repository about that?
Yeah, there is, but it is a real. I can post it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it might have stalled a little bit.
It might be a
But
thing that worth discussing with the group, though. I mean, it's not trivial. It's not just, oh, let's add one more field here, because
okay.
it's no longer a window thing. It's technically a layer.
Right. Um,
So we are basically going into the same territory as with GL, where it's something else associated with the window that needs to be portably exposed.
Okay. Um, I don't have any Mac experience, so I can't really speak to this. But the main goal was to support graphics libraries not needing to speak to Winit directly, and just being able to speak through this crate. So if this is required to be able to allow graphics libraries to interact with their presentation ability, then I think we definitely need to support this, even if it makes it a little less, you know, if it puts a tiny layer in there. I think that's a cost that we have to eat.
So we could discuss whether it's required or not in the first place.
Oh, okay.
My my experience so far shows that like you can extract the layer from the window that you've been given, and row window handle provides you with either an S view or UI view from which you can get the layer. The unsupported case is where you have like a tree of layers and you want to render only to one of that layer. And like this is something that we may argue maybe not the case for row window handle to even try to support.
Uh, if you had the base handle, could you perform various operating system calls or whatever to like get information about that whole tree and then pick out some part of the tree with it?
Yeah, I think you can inspect it.
Okay. Well, I guess I would say that for like for a first like zero point 0.1 version, we should just sort of do the basic thing and then we can add the complicated thing later. Does that sound reasonable?
My point is that we may not need to do anything.
Oh, well,
Like
yeah.
the
If we don't need to do anything at all, that's also good.
Yeah. Well, let's keep discussing on the GitHub issue. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like the currently released zero point 0.2 version has the pointers for the window and the view, and then people can use that sort of roundabout right now if they need to. Okay.
Right.
Um, all right. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. Uh, did people have any final thoughts?
I had two questions. One for attendance. Like, it might be good if I just jot down the GitHub handles of people who joined. So I have Locathor, Quark, Navi, me. But for Jake, Carl, and Tyler, I'm not sure what your handles would be.
I'm MTAK, MTAK dash.
We can ask everyone to just leave a smile on the issue, and then you will be able to inspect that,
Sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
or emoji on the issue.
And then the other thing is, so we still had a thing about discussing open working group PRs, and we're not sure how to improve the issue tracker triage. And I think there's also some things unclear about when to move things to our working group repository and so on. I'm not sure what Alex and Erland think because they're the only maintainers. So maybe we should at some point also have a discussion as to like higher level, um, like how the process of the working group can be improved, but that might not be a good idea to discuss during these meetings.
I think we should definitely open an issue about maybe adding some sort of more than just those two, because those two people do seem kind of busy. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but improving that is something. If you put it on the notes, then we could talk about it in the issues, which is technically where we're supposed to make all of our decisions. So I guess it's fine if we don't speak about it during the call. Um, we only have two PRs right now. One of them is Quark's ecosystem guide. Um, I don't know if you want to keep holding that open, Quark, or just close it in favor of potentially working on the other thing.
As soon as the other one is open, I can close my.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And the other one is from Eclisma, who's not here, so we can speak about that someday when they are here. I guess that's good. Is everyone nothing else to add? All right. I'm gonna stop the recording.